Thanks for this opportunity to present on thyroid function test and more specifically on potential interferences or confounding factors that may appear with this testing. Why are we talking about this kind of panel? Because, as everyone knows, thyroid is one of the most important gland of the body by the size and by the weight, and the thyroid hormones are masters in controlling many metabolic function in the body, many organ function, and they are playing important role in the bone, cardiovascular, and reproductive function. And as laboratorians, we are receiving a lot of requests for testing for thyroid hormones because the physician need that to assess the thyroid status. And unfortunately, it's more and more the case because there is more than 200 billion people over the world suffering of thyroid dysfunction. There is the rise of thyroid cancer, thyroid autoimmune disorders, and we still have area over the world where there is iodide deficiency. So we are receiving a lot of tests. The most important tests that we are using are the TSH, the number one in the decision algorithm, thyroid stimulating hormone. If the TSH is high, that means that the pituitary try to respond to low level of hormones in the case of hypothyroidism. And if the TSH is really low, is that the pituitary try to respond to very high circulating levels of hormone in the case of hyperthyroidism, because we have a nice feedback between the pituitary, the thyroid, and the level of thyroid hormone circulating in the body. So TSH, the first line one. Then we have the free T4 assay to evaluate the status of the hormones circulating in the body. So the typical case for an hyperthyroidism will be low TSH and high free T4. We could have additional testing, for example, testing for TSH receptor antibodies in the case of the clinician suspect grave diseases with an autoimmune origin of the hyperthyroidism. In the case of hypothyroidism, the TSH will be high. Free T4 could be low in the typical cases, and also potential additional tests needed, like the thyroid peroxidase antibodies in the case of suspicion of Hashimoto autoimmune hypothyroidism. And laboratory over the world received hundreds of tests for thyroid function tests per day. So a large volume and key test for the clinical decision. Could be easy story, but not so easy indeed, because there is a lot of factors that can affect the levels of thyroid function tests, and we need, as laboratorians, to integrate these factors in the practices, raise the awareness to the physician, and make the clinical decision established on a strong basis. What could be the factors of variability? We have the analytical factor, the imprecision, the sensitivity of the test. We have factors that we have less ability to control, uncontrollable factors, like the age, and we know that we need to adjust at the extreme age the reference value for thyroid function test, like in the pediatrics or in elderly people. There is the potential effect of gender, even it could be more limited for thyroid function. There is the case of pregnancy, and we know that we need to adjust thyroid function test according to the pregnancy trimester. And in some other hormones, there is controllable factors of variability like the circadian rhythms, more pronounced from other hormones than the thyroid one, like the cortisol or the testosterone, the fasting status. So a bunch of factors that we need to consider and integrate in our reference value. In the good news for the analytical part is that we have automated most of the thyroid function tests, so allowing laboratory to deliver the results quite faster to integrate the testing. There is the question or whether of the standardization between the different methods, because most of the assays right now for thyroid function tests are immunoassays. And everyone knows that immunoassay depend on the performances of the antibody used by the method. And we are progressing for standardization, but however, there is still huge inter-method variability that's illustrated in this slide by the testing for TSH receptor autoantibodies. As you could see, there is different absolute concentration according to the different methods. And there is on the market competitive assay for TSH receptor autoantibodies, but there is also a new or more recent generation of two-site immunoassays. So the format are different. The kind of TSH receptors or modified TSH receptors might differ from the different assays, leading to different absolute value. And I think it's important for the monitoring of patients with grave disease, where the TSH receptor testing is really useful, to try to keep the same method or laboratory for the monitoring to avoid a bias from a method to another. But we need to mention that huge efforts are put and initiated by Scientific Society of Laboratory Medicine, like the International Federation of Laboratory Medicine, the IFCC, a lot of working group and standardization progressing for TSH, for free T4. We are on a good way. Reference method are established, so quite optimistic. Despite the question of standardization because of the antibody, there is also the question of the specificity of what we are targeting. The example, again, back to my TSH receptor autoantibodies, the population of autoantibodies that we are targeting might differ from a patient to another. We could face stimulating antibody, and that's usually the case at the start of the grave disease with hyperthyroidism. So the antibody is fixed to the receptors, inducing the release of hormone. But there is also population of blocking antibodies that could be the contrast effect more related to a phenotype of hypothyroidism. And there is, for the patient, the switch from population that could appear among to the disease. So the specificity of the assay and I'm meaning the ability to differentiate stimulating to blocking antibodies, is important for the clinical decision. And there is some specific cases, like in pediatrics or exophthalmia, where we know that it could be better to have specific assay for stimulating autoantibody. So specificity matters, and according to the method you use, you can impact the clinical performance. So not always easy. Painting from René Magritte, famous Belgian painter, master of illusion. So we should take care of the illusion and confounding factors. Back to the factor of variability, there is the question of the inter-method variability, and as already mentioned, the question of reference intervals. We need to adjust for pediatry, where the value might be a bit higher than in the adult, and there is also the need to adjust for the age. Laboratory are important players, are key players to define these reference values according to our own validation in the lab, according to some publication already existing in the literature. That's part of the validation process, mandatory. Pregnancy, need to adjust for the trimester specific value, as the free T4, for example, could decrease according to the trimester of pregnancy. And that's important also to avoid misinterpretation of hypothyroxinemia in pregnant women. So reference value matters. What matters also is the situation. If you are practicing in hospital settings, there is also the potential of what we call the non-thyroidal illness. The thyroid function will be affected by acute disorders or acute intervention like surgery, and you will have impact with higher TSH value, decreased synthesis of hormone, and hence reverse T3 production because of, for example, the impact of pro-inflammatory cytokines. So difficult to interpret the test in such clinical condition. The recommendation will be to have the washout period or waiting after the patient recover from the hospital stay or the surgery, and recontrol the thyroid function test, and then really assess the thyroid gland. Another factor that I would like to discuss today is the impact of medication. We know that there is a lot of drug in cardiology or heparin that can affect thyroid function test and T4 testing. We have also the impact of new formula for thyroxine supplementation. That was the case in Belgium, that was the case also in France. And the bioavailability of the thyroxine could be modified, misleading a bit more the capacity to really interpret T4 or free T4 for patients under thyroxine. That's not the standard. The standard is more rely on the TSH to interpret the thyroid status of your patient. But if you try to use the thyroxine, might be wise to adjust a bit your reference value. Another example could be the impact of the binding protein on the thyroid hormone levels. And we know some states where the strongest affinity binding protein for the thyroid hormone, the thyroid binding globulin, the TBG, could be affected. That's the case where you could have increased concentration like in treatment like estrogen, in some young ladies, estroprogestative contraception. So you will have increased TBG and higher total thyroid hormone concentration. And depending of your assay sensitivity, you might also impact the free T4 assay. That's why it could be also useful when you suspect a TBG altered concentration to test it. There is the contrast case where you have glucocorticoid or androgens that could decrease the TBG, so falsely lower your total, sometimes free T4 assays. Decalcomanie, another picture from famous illusionist Belgian painter. And back to another topic, the topic of interferences. Interferences need to be considered because that the publication we did with Julien Favres and the team, the consequences of interferences are strong in the clinical decision. So in 50% of the case we reviewed, there was a clinical impact. And by clinical impact, we mean need to retest, wrongly prescribe drug or dose, or wrongly prescribe imaging. So it's a question of patient safety. Interference mislead the clinical decision and then impact the physician decision, potentially harmful for the patient. So that's why sometimes you are receiving the call from the physician, hey, Houston, we have a problem. I am facing a patient and the tests you are reporting are not adapted to the clinical situation that I'm facing. And I would like to illustrate today some kind of interference that we could face. The first one is the macro TSH, so macro immune complex with immunoglobulin and TSH. So you can have falsely increased TSH value, and the opportunity or the solution that we have to detect it is like for the prolactin and the suspicion of macroprolactinemia is the pre-treatment of the sample with the polyethylene glycol. So you can easily calculate the ratio, the baseline value, the value after the PEG precipitation. You can estimate the recovery and see if your immunoreactivity is mostly related to a real TSH or to a macro form, a macro complex. Like the prolactin, the interferences might differ from an immunoassay to another, so it's a question of sensitivity of the method. But treatment or prevention option is polyethylene glycol. Another case of interference still existing, and there is always case, even in 2019 reported in the literature, heterophilic antibody. So heterophilic antibody will make the bridge between the capture and the signal antibody, mimicking the presence of TSH, for example. Another illustration of falsely increased TSH. We have option, so blocking tubes that could block after the treatment the interference with heterophilic antibody. So you will normalize after the treatment the value. And the best practices where we have also the potential to dilute the sample and see the linearity. If the linearity is not there, you can suspect the interferences. And you have also the option to try to test with another method. Ask to one of your partner lab or colleague, could you test my sample to see if it's something affecting only your method and confirming that you are candidate for interferences. Another famous autoantibody related interferences in the world of thyroid testing is thyroglobulin and the impact of thyroglobulin autoantibodies. Some methods are more sensitive than the other to the interference with autoantibody, and the consequences is autoantibodies are blunting the signal. So you have false negative TG results in people or patients with positive anti-TG. The consequence could be important in patient monitor for thyroid cancer when you can miss some metastasis or recurrent cases. So as recommendation is you need, when you order a thyroglobulin test, to ask and request the autoantibody for thyroglobulin. If positive, you might be sensitive to an interferences. 30% of the patient with thyroid cancer could have TG antibody. So what you can do is, okay, better to not interpret the TG results or reflex to a TG method that could be less sensitive to the interferences. I continue the story with the autoantibody. We faced few cases where we had anti-streptavidin antibodies. And these anti-streptavidin antibodies were more impacting method based on the format using biotin streptavidin complex. The results were falsely positive for the free T4, and you see on the picture we had extremely high value for free T4, free T3. When we test with another method, we had normal results, and the complaint from the physician was, I am facing a thyroid patient. Why I am having this biological hyperthyroidism. When we go for the pre-treatment of the samples, we depleted the interferences with some beads as well as with some blocking reagents. And with the help of the IVD company, we were able to type the kind of interference. And unfortunately for the patient, that was an anti-streptavidin antibody. So could be prevented. I think it's important, another key message, once there is an interference noticed for a patient, put it in this medical record. So that's avoid mistake for the future. Another transition illusion to go through another kind of interference, which could be the biotin one. So biotin interference has been reported in the literature, different cases, and interference is dependent of the dose and of the assays, of course, and mostly also relevant for immunoassay based on biotin streptavidin format. Of course, for patients with very high dose of biotin, the one that could come from multiple sclerosis treatment or some rare disease with very high dose, again, interference might be more pronounced. The impact is for competitive assays, so free hormone or hormone measurement, we will have false positive results. For competitive assay, we are blunting the signal with false negative result for the TSH, for example. and we are mimicking with biotin hyperthyroidism. So there is some results in the literature evaluating the impact of biotin on the assay or in healthy volunteer taking some biotin supplementation. That was the case reported by Danny Lee and a team in Minnesota, and they demonstrated the impact of biotin supplementation on different methods and on the TSH, for example, as illustrated in this picture, with a decrease at D7 after the taking of biotin. So biotin might be considered as an interference, again, dependent of the dose of the biotin, dependent of the assay, the manufacturers, and we know that the manufacturers are trying to improve the assays with less sensitivity to biotin. So these algorithms summarize the different impact of interferences on thyroid function test. There is the way also to prevent them, and we have efficient method to do that in our laboratory. The dilution, the comparison with other methods, polyethylene glycol, blocking tubes. So we have an arsenal of tests to check for interferences. Globally, if you are suspecting a discordant test, or if the physician is suspecting a discordant test according to the clinic of the patient, check if the reference value were adjusted for the age, for pregnancy. Is there any potential confounding medication? Are we facing a patient with an acute severe disease or after a treatment, condition of non-thyroidal illness? Or are we facing some assay interferences? Or we have also rare cases of thyroid hormone resistance where you might need some genetic testing. Key message, we could detect these interferences as specialists in laboratory medicine when we are doing the biological validation of the samples, but the communication with the healthcare team, with the physician, is fundamental. So they can call you when they suspect something wrong. You can inform them about the maybe some pitfalls of your methods, telling them also what is your method that you are using in the lab. So please go discuss with your physician, go for this multidisciplinary team action that will help at the end of the day to improve the use of the test and make the best use of the in vitro diagnostic test. To conclude, I would like also to thank the people from the Belgian Thyroid Club, trying to also promote best use of the test, the best practices in thyroid in Belgium. You have the information, and again to thank the LabRoots team for the opportunity to present to you today. Thanks a lot.